Welcome to the deep dive. Today, the global climate conversation, it's really shifted, hasn't it? It's less about if we need to act and much more about how fast and maybe how badly the actual transition is, well, struggling.
Right.
We've pulled together some really significant sources for you today. We're looking at the big picture science from the IPCC, but also the really detailed energy market forecasts from the IEA and some academic work, too.
A real mix, yeah.
So our job today is basically twofold. First, what does the science actually demand? Like, what's the required pace to phase down fossil fuels?
Mm-hmm.
And second, where are things going wrong? Why is the clean energy deployment, hitting roadblocks? Where are policies or economics slowing things down?
And it's worth just setting the stage. Where are we right now before we even talk about the future?
Good point.
The baseline, it's already pretty stark. Global surface temperature is up about 1.15 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial times.
Already over 1 degree.
Already. And what really jumps out from the historical data is just the acceleration. I mean, think about this. 58% of all the CO2 emitted since 1850, that happened before 1989.
Okay, the majority over a long period.
But the other 42%, that was just in the 30 years between 1990 and 2019.
Wow.
We basically hit the gas right when we should have been hitting the brakes, hard.
Okay, so let's unpack that scientific mandate then, because the speed required, it's kind of mind-boggling when you look at the numbers.
It really is.
If we're serious about limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the target everyone talks about, the cuts needed between just 2020 and 2050 are huge. Global coal, that needs to drop on average by 95%.
95%.
Oil, down 62%. And even natural gas, often called the bridge fuel, that needs to fall 42%.
And that natural gas figure, it's actually the most variable one in the models. It looks a bit more forgiving, maybe, but there's a massive asterisk there. The scenarios that allow for more gas use, they are basically making a huge bet on technologies like carbon capture and storage CCS and carbon dioxide removal, CDR.
So keeping gas means gambling on tech that's not fully proven at scale yet.
Exactly. It's a huge technological gamble. And if that bet doesn't pay off, if large-scale CDR just isn't feasible or it's too slow,
then what?
Then the cuts become even more severe, like immediately. If those removal techs are limited, then coal has to fall 99% by 2050.
99%. That's basically switching it off tomorrow.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Oil needs to drop 70% and gas needs an 84% reduction. Much steeper.
But here's the disconnect, right? You compare that scientific requirement, that emergency brake scenario, with what governments are actually planning.
Yeah, the reality check.
Based on assessments from just a couple of years ago, government plans show, maybe modest coal decreases, but they actually project increasing oil and gas supply out to 2040 or beyond.
Which creates this massive production gap, as the sources call it.
A gap between what science says is necessary and what policy is aiming for.
And you have to understand why that gap exists. The IEA sources really highlight the immediate costs, economic, social, political, of cutting subsidies or shifting the supply chains quickly.
So physics versus economics, basically.
In a nutshell, yes. Entrenched systems fighting against physical necessity.
Okay, so that's the scientific side of the gap. But let's pivot to the solution side, the renewables. Even with all the urgency, how fast are they actually getting deployed? What's the IEA saying now?
Well, this is where we get another dose of sobering reality. The IEA's latest forecast, it's actually revised down the expected growth in renewables for the 2025 to 2030 period.
Revised down? By how much?
By 5% compared to last year's report.
No.
Now, 5% might not sound huge, but it translates to 248 gigawatts less capacity expected.
248 gigawatts, that's a huge amount of power. Enough to run a whole country, practically. Just gone from the forecast.
Exactly. Wiped off the forecast.
So where is that happening? Which regions are driving this downward revision? Must be policy issues, right?
Absolutely. Policy uncertainty is a killer here.
Yeah.
Take the U.S., for example.
Okay.
Their forecast got revised down by almost half, 50%.
Wow. Why?
It's linked directly to things like phasing out federal tax credits earlier than expected, new import restrictions coming in, and even suspending new offshore wind leasing.
Yeah.
These kinds of stops and starts, they just destroy investor confidence.
Yeah, creates huge uncertainty.
And even look at China. They're still the powerhouse, driving nearly 60% of global growth.
Yeah.
But even their forecast was cut. It was the second biggest absolute cut, about 129 gigawatts. And that's largely because they're shifting away from guaranteed prices, the old fixed tariffs, towards more competitive auctions. Necessary, maybe, but disruptive in the short term.
Okay, but here's something that seems really weird. The sources talk about this financial paradox. Installations are surging globally, prices are falling, yet the companies making the gear are struggling.
It's a bizarre situation, isn't it? There's this massive oversupply, especially in solar panels, mostly coming out of China. So prices for solar PV have crashed down over 60% just since 2023.
Which sounds great for consumers, great for deployment.
You'd think so. But the manufacturers themselves, they are reporting enormous losses, like billions of dollars.
So the market signal's completely broken. Cheap panels, but bankrupt companies. That can't be sustainable for the industry. We need to scale up massively.
It's not. It's creating real fragility. We saw PV manufacturers report cumulative losses near $5 billion recently. And wind manufacturers outside China, they lost $1.2 billion last year.
So the transition is kind of eating itself financially.
In a way, yes. It highlights a major structural risk in the very sector we're relying on.
Okay, huge risk. But let's say we get past that. Assume the tech gets built, the companies somehow survive. What's the next barrier? Where does the power hit the wall? Infrastructure, right?
Exactly. Grid integration. This is a success problem.
Oh.
By 2030, wind and solar, the variable renewables, are projected to generate almost 30% of global electricity.
That's a lot of variable power.
It is. And managing that variability is tough. It leads to rising levels of curtailment.
Just explain curtailment quickly for listeners.
Yeah. Curtailment is basically when a wind farm or a solar plant is ready to produce power, but the grid operator tells it, no, stop, because either the power lines are full or there just isn't enough demand at that exact moment.
So you're wasting clean energy.
You are. And it's happening more and more. Look at Chile this year. They curtailed over 15% of their wind and solar generation.
15%.
Transmission bottlenecks, not enough wires, and just too much solar power generated in the middle of the day when demand isn't highest.
Okay, so what's the fix?
Flexibility solutions. The good news is this problem is forcing investment. We're seeing a big surge in things like pumped storage, hydropower, PSH.
Using water batteries, essentially.
Basically, yeah. Pumping water uphill when power is cheap and letting it run down through turbines when power is needed. For the first time, PSH additions are actually exceeding new conventional hydro dams. It shows grids are desperate for ways to store and balance all that solar and wind.
And the way we buy the power is changing too, isn't it? Moving away from those guaranteed prices you mentioned.
Yes. Procurement is evolving fast. Competitive auctions are now the main tool globally, replacing the old feed-in tariffs. They're expected to account for like 60% of new large-scale projects through 2030.
And in Europe, there's this push towards something called two-sided contracts for difference, or CFDs. How do they work?
Right. CFDs are becoming really important, especially in Europe, expected to cover maybe 45% of additions there. Think of it like an insurance policy for both sides.
Okay.
There's an agreed strike price. If the market price goes above that, the generator pays back the difference. If it falls below, they get a top-up.
So it stabilizes revenue for the investor?
Exactly.
And protects consumers from crazy price spikes. It's about predictability in these volatile markets.
Precisely. It's a more sophisticated way to manage risk for everyone involved.
Okay, let's connect this to the bigger picture again. Energy security. Renewables obviously help reduce reliance on imported fossil fuels, right? That was a big deal during the recent energy crisis.
Absolutely massive. The IEA estimates renewables saved importing countries over $500 billion in avoided fossil fuel costs just in 2022. Huge geopolitical win there.
But there's always a but. It creates new dependencies, doesn't it?
It does. We're swapping dependence on fuel imports for dependence on equipment supply chains and critical minerals.
So trading oil geopolitics for, I don't know, silicon and rare earth geopolitics.
Kinda, yeah. And the concentration is intense. China, for instance, is projected to keep somewhere between 75% and 95% of the global solar PV supply chain capacity through 2030.
Wow, almost total dominance.
And on the minerals side, think about wind turbines. They need rare earth elements for powerful magnets. Demand for those is set to jump over 50% by 2030. And there are growing supply risks for other things too, like silver used in solar panels.
So we're shifting the choke points, not eliminating them.
We're definitely shifting them. It's a different kind of strategic challenge.
Okay, let's move to the final section. We need to talk about the impacts that are already unavoidable and what comprehensive solutions look like. The IPCC sources, they're pretty blunt that the impacts are actually worse than we thought even a few years ago.
They are. Widespread, severe, across pretty much every sector you look at. Food security has already been reduced globally by climate change. Water security, too.
How bad is the water situation?
Roughly half the world's population, half already experiences severe water scarcity for at least part of the year. That's today.
half the planet.
And some impacts are becoming irreversible, certainly on human timescales. Think about glaciers melting, the hydrological changes downstream. Those aren't coming back. And the coral reefs. The projections are just devastating. Even if we hit the 1.5 degree C target, we're likely to lose another 70 to 90% of them.
Just devastating. Given how bad things already are, what are the quickest levers we can pull right now? Things that have immediate benefits.
Methane. Definitely methane. Strong, rapid, sustained cuts in methane emissions.
Why methane specifically?
Because it's a potent greenhouse gas, but relatively short-lived in the atmosphere compared to CO2. Cutting methane gives you a faster impact on near-term warming. Plus, big co-benefits cutting methane also improves air quality and human health.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Fossil fuel subsidies. Removing them.
Ah, the politically tricky one.
Extremely tricky, but the potential impact is huge. Studies suggest removing those subsidies globally could cut greenhouse gas emissions by up to 10% by 2030.
10%. Just by stopping payments that encourage pollution seems like a no-brainer, but...
But it's incredibly difficult politically, because you have to have measures in place to protect vulnerable groups who might rely on that subsidized energy. It needs to be done carefully and equitably. Powerful lever, but wrapped in political challenges.
And underpinning all of this is money, the financial gap. Still huge.
Still staggering, yes. The models show that the average annual investment needed for mitigation is something like 3 to 6 times higher than what we're actually spending now.
3 to 6 times.
And critically, this isn't just about rich countries funding their own shift. The sources are really clear. Accelerated financial support for developing countries is absolutely essential. It's not optional for a global solution.
So equity isn't just a nice to have, it's fundamental to making any of this work.
Absolutely. The sources consistently emphasize integrated, equitable actions, prioritizing climate justice, involving local communities, using indigenous knowledge. These aren't side issues. They are crucial for actually achieving sustainable, resilient development.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together then. What we've seen across these sources is this really stark dual challenge. On one hand, the science is screaming for immediate, deep, rapid cuts in all fossil fuels. Delay has catastrophic consequences.
No ambiguity there.
But on the other hand, the main solution, renewables deployment, is actually seeing its forecast revised downwards. It's hitting practical barriers, market issues, financial stress for manufacturers, grid bottlenecks, policy uncertainty.
Right. And that production gap, we talked about the gap between the science and government plans that really encapsulates the core risk we face.
So the future isn't just about how many tons of CO2 we emit, is it? It's about whether we can fix these systemic problems right now.
Exactly. It's about implementing those smarter systems like the two-sided CFDs in Europe you mentioned, like building out grid flexibility with things like PSH everywhere. It really comes down to political and financial will. Can we bridge that gap?
And maybe one final thought for you, the listener, to take away. We tend to focus heavily on these targets, 2030, 2050.
Understandably.
But many climate impacts, as you said, they play out over much, much longer timescales, centuries, even millennia.
That's right. Think about sea level rise. Global mean sea level is going to continue rising for millennia because of the warming we've already locked in, especially from the ice sheets.
Millennia.
But the amount of rise is drastically different depending on the path we take now. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees C might mean, say, 2 to 3 meters of rise over the next 2,000 years. Letting it slip to 2 degrees C could mean 2 to 6 meters over that same period.
So the choices we make this decade, they're literally reshaping the coastlines, the map of the world, for thousands of years to come.
Precisely. The decisions today determine the permanent geography of the planet. That's the real, long-term scale of what's at stake here.
And that's a wrap on this episode of What You Don't Know, You Don't Know. If your brain feels a little fuller or like it just stumbled onto something way more interesting than expected, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss next week's deep dive into, well, something you didn't even know you didn't know.